And welcome everyone. We should be live now. We are live from London. It is 6:35 p.m. UK time. If any of you were completely new to me, if you don't know what's happening, we've got a live walk in London, but we've got 10 minutes before to start. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. So you still have time to make yourself a cup of tea or grab a coffee or anything stronger. Hi Matthew, hi Tish, welcome everyone. You can hear me properly, perfect. If any of you are watching this on replay in the next few days, if you're not watching us live, then you can skip the next 9 minutes if you want to go straight into the live walk. We'll be for the next 9 minutes just chatting and welcoming everyone. If any of you was new to me, I'm Nathalie, and I'll be with you for the next hour or so, unless you decide to dash off and move on to a different video. I've not done the tapping yet, but thank you for reminding me. So yeah, most of you know the drill already. Just to make sure I'm all plugged in properly on everything in terms of microphone, I'm gonna tap. See, I've got a microphone over here with a fluffy thingy. I'm gonna tap it 3 times. You've got to let me know in the chat if you've heard it properly. You should have been able to hear the tapping. And welcome Sandrine. And welcome Praxis. And Sam is here as well. Welcome everyone. Let us know in the chat if you happen to be new. Let us know where you're tuning from. And we've got about 8 minutes. Apologies, it's not the nicest background behind me, but that was the only place where I had a good lighting on my face. So today you've heard it perfect. Thank you guys. Thanks for letting me know. If at any point through the tour you start hearing a lot of background noises or a lot of wind, let me know. My microphone could get disconnected at any time because I've got 2 adapters. So yeah, that could happen. And you know another thing that could happen? We could lose the signal for a few seconds or a few minutes. Hopefully not. But if you are watching the replay and you have a few cuts, that's probably that I lost the signal for a few seconds. If you can, try to keep the chat busy. Oh, you Michaela, okay, you've got a different name today. Or maybe I never paid attention to the Praxis name. Welcome Michaela, nice to see you here. So if you don't mind, I know this tour is full of storytelling, but even if you are captivated by the story, do try to keep the chat active if you can, because otherwise I won't really know if I've lost you because of signal or anything. Hopefully it won't happen, but you know, we never know. So if you keep the chat active, even if it's just with a little heart emoji or whatever you might when I send, this way I know that you're still here with me. So tonight it is of course Guy Fawkes night. Oh, it's a different Michaela, okay, because we do have a Michaela that often joins. Well, welcome Michaela, nice to have you along. Evil twin, which one is the evil one? We don't know.
Fuck's sake! Wait, doing exercise.
And welcome Emily as well, and Fran, and anyone that I've missed in the chat. Oh, it's the original Michaela. Okay, wait. I'm confused now, but whichever Michaela you are, welcome. So we've got, let me tell you, 4 minutes to go. Hi, Wendy. Hi, Shaz. How did you know that Shaz was here before she spoke? I might have missed a message. Tish seems to be able to see people before I see them. It's probably just because of the delay. So let's see. 3 minutes to go. Laurie, not really. A lot of the fireworks were actually last weekend, like Battersea Power Station and stuff. I've heard a few. You might have heard a few behind me just now, but those are not the council one. Those are like private people having a go. There's one official one, I think, in Morden, so south, very far south, London, and one in Bloomsbury. But the main one, the big ones, I think they happened last weekend. I feel like my hat is not straight, but because everything is reversed from what I see. If I try to fix it, I'm gonna fix it wrong the other side. So it's better if I don't touch it, because I see myself in landscape, symmetrical, whatever you call it. So it's actually difficult to. Hi, Pauline. And 1 minute to go. No, 2. What am I saying? 2 minutes to go. Let me gracefully stand up. Oops. So I'm by the Lambeth Bridge. Through the looking glass, exactly. I can hear a helicopter somewhere. They are not checking on me. I've not done anything. You've got some on the 8 in Wimbledon. Cool. Yeah, I think it's a shame when they do it on weekends. It's better to do it on the day. Mind you, I say that because I often work on weekends anyway, and I get frustrated that all the fun is happening on weekends only. Yeah, side by side advert. I've just had a meeting an hour ago with some YouTube people. They talked about it. But it was a meeting about live streams in general, but most of the time they were talking gibberish to me. I had no idea what they were talking about. Hi, Samantha. I mean, when I say with YouTube, it's not me on YouTube, it's just a conference call with 120 of us. UT is ready, perfect. So now you're in the perfect situation. Right, let's see. It is officially time to start. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Lambeth. At the moment I'm on the south side of the river. Tonight we're having a little live walk about Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot. And without further ado, let me flip this camera around and let's make a move. So we are in front of the Lambeth Palace, this beautiful building, the Tudor building just ahead of us now. It is, it's the Archbishop of, the residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury. We just have a new Archbishop of Canterbury, because the last one had quitted, and she's a lady. She's the first Archbishop of Canterbury ever that is a lady, I believe. Her name is Dame Sarah something. Sarah Milali? Yes, Dame Sarah Milali, I think her name is. Don't know if she's moved in yet. I think she might actually move in January. Although I've seen some lights on the side, so she might already be here. And tonight, of course, we are to talk about Catholics and Protestants, and I'll tell you how those guys decided to blow off Parliament. At the time of the Gunpowder Plot, the Archbishop of Canterbury was not too extreme either way. He was a Protestant, of course, but he wasn't too anti-Catholics, and he wasn't too Protestant either. He was quite middle, because at the time you had those people that believed that Protestantism had not gone far enough. So that's why they moved to America, of course, with the Mayflower. But yeah, at the time the Archbishop was quite balanced. Anyway, I decided to start here, not so much because of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Hi Walpurry, and welcome everyone that just joined. I wanted to start here in Lambeth because technically the Gunpowder Plot started here in Lambeth because a gentleman called Robert Catesby had a little home over here. This was his Lambeth residence. So he would have had some lodgings right here on the other side of the river, right opposite of Parliament, really. But we'll get back to Catesby in a moment. I'll explain who he is. Because really, we call it Guy Fawkes night, but we should call it Catesby's night. He was very much the brain behind all that. But first, let me explain how we got to this. We are in 1605, so that's about 70 years after the Reformation. So for those of you that might not know, the Reformation, it's of course when Henry VIII broke up with the Catholic Church to create his own church, the Church of England. Henry did that to be able to get a divorce, to secure a male heir with another wife. Henry VIII, at heart, he was still a Catholic anyway. He wasn't that strong into... I'm gonna try to cross because I think the green man is not working on this side. So yeah, he wasn't that strong into the reforms. But after that, his son Edward was much more of a Protestant than he was. And then we went back to Mary. Mary was the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, so she was still a Catholic like her mum. So then the country moved back to Catholicism, and Mary, everyone that disagreed, she'd burn them. Some say that's how she got the name Bloody Mary. And after that, Mary died without an heir, so the crown went back to her sister Elizabeth. That was, of course, a Protestant because she was the daughter of Anne Boleyn. The concubina, she was known as. And of course, Queen Elizabeth I was a Protestant. At first, she wanted some form of religious freedom. She did not want to persecute and kill as many people as her sister did. But after the Pope decided to excommunicate her, the Pope basically almost told people that it was okay to eliminate her. So there were a lot of people that tried to kill the Queen, and then she felt like she had to be stronger against the Catholics, and she started to persecute them a bit more. So we've got a beautiful view over here on the Parliament building today. When we go back to 1605, do not expect that building. That's mostly Victorian. At the time, Westminster would have been very, very different from what we see today. But beautiful view. We'll see the building a bit closer in a moment. We'll go and cross the Lambeth Bridge over here. The Lambeth Bridge, it is painted in red, although it's more like a pinky light, but it's in red to go with the seats of the House of Lords. Some of you might know the Parliament is divided into two sections. You've got the House of Commons, where the seats are green, like the Westminster Bridge on that side. And on this side of the building, you've got the House of Lords, where the seats are red, like the bridge on this side. Anyway, so Elizabeth I, she introduced a lot of fines. So at the time, religion was not an option. Not only you'd have to go to church, but you'd have to go to your local church. if you didn't turn up at church because you were a Catholic, they'll find you. So most Catholics, they learned how to keep their heads down. They started to go to Protestant church. They had to anyway. They couldn't afford those heavy fines for not attending church. So, our conspirators for tonight, do not imagine them working class boys. They were not. They were members of the gentry, they were coming from rich families. They were the ones that were able to not go to church and pay for those fines. Very crippling fines. I mean, they were losing their wealth. And not only were they losing their money, but on top of that, those people were used to go to university and get, good jobs as a judge or magistrate or whatever it might be, They couldn't do that anymore. Because to go and graduate from Oxford or Cambridge or whatever it might be, you'd have to swear oath to the Queen. They couldn't do that because the Pope had excommunicated Queen Elizabeth I. So those young men, they couldn't get a proper education unless they went abroad to Catholic Spain, for example. And the lights are very pretty when you see the reflection on the river as well. And so those men, they were screwed. They felt like their life there was no future for them. And they would have witnessed their parents being fined as well, and some of them were jailed as well. And when you want to live your life as a Catholic, you'd have to see Mass, you'd have to see the priest. But the Jesuit priests, they were considered the hardest, the more dangerous, according to the king at least, or the Queen at the time. And the Jesuits, they were, I don't know if you can hear, but I can hear some fireworks behind me. Although again, I think it might be some little private ones. Hi Lee, and welcome everyone that just joined. So yeah, those, you'd have to see Mass, you'd have to see a priest, and the Jesuits were illegal. They couldn't be in the country. So a lot of people had to harbor those priests. They were hiding them at home. You might have heard of those priest halls. They were little, no, you can't hear it, never mind. There were those little, that means I've got a good microphone that blurs off a bit of the background, so that's good. There were some people with those little alcoves at home, or cupboards or something under the floorboard, or tiny little spaces where they could hide a priest. But if they did get caught, the punishment was the capital punishment. Sometimes, even worse. Guy Fawkes, as well as the Wright brothers, they came from York. As they were teenagers, they probably would have witnessed the horrible, horrible death of Margaret Clitheroe. Margaret was one of those ladies that had harbored a Jesuit priest. She refused to confess because she didn't want to put anyone in trouble. She was executed, but worse than what you can imagine. So she would have been stripped naked, or almost fully naked, a public execution, with thousands of people watching. They would have placed a big rock under her back. They would have laid her on her back, on the floor. They would have placed a door, well, actually her own home door, on top of her, and then they dropped huge rocks on top of her. So she was crushed to death. With a big audience cheering and whooping, and it's a horrible way to go, and it took hours to kill her. So you'd have to imagine that those boys, they would have witnessed that. They would have witnessed what happened to someone that's harboring a priest, someone that's just, trying to live their own religion. So, today it's quite hard to imagine how they could have become so radicalized. But for them, their life was over anyway. And at the time, they imagined at the time that if they picked the wrong side, the answer was simple. They wouldn't be able to go to heaven. Because if they believed in the Pope and everything, and they decided to convert to Protestantism, then they would become heretic in the eyes of the church, and they'd go to heaven. Yeah, poor St. Margaret. They've got her hand. I think it's in York, Jenny. You can probably see it somewhere in York. They've got her hand that was used as a. You probably don't want to see it actually, but they kept her hand as a relic. I think the Catholic Church still has it somewhere in York. It's a dried hand. Anyway, so yeah, poor Margaret. And that's really what drove those young men to become so radicalized. Now, what happened is that they had hope, because the Queen Elizabeth I, was not immortal. Some people believed she was, because she was the longest reigning monarch at the time, but eventually she was gonna die. And as you might remember, she did not have a male heir, or she didn't have an heir at all, to be honest. And she did not name one. So people were speculating on who might be the next one. Some might hope, this is a nice angle here, that's the one I put on the thumbnail. Some hoped it might be her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots. That was a Catholic. So finally they could maybe move back to, or be able to live their religion again. As you might know, that didn't happen because Mary was framed and executed. But then the next one in line would have been her son, James VI of Scotland. He was a Protestant, but James was a very good politician. He knew exactly, you know, when people were not quite sure whether he was the heir, he tried to please everyone. He tried to let the Catholic believe that he would give them a bit more freedom. Actually, one of our conspirator tonight, Thomas Parcy, he went up to Scotland to see the king before he became king. And James, being a good politician, he was like, yeah, of course. He let him believe. He led him to believe that that things would be better under his reign. And to be fair, at the very beginning it was. When he first accessed the throne in 1603, when Elizabeth died, the king did kind of pose the debt collector, you know, the fine collectors. He didn't really stop the fines. They're called recusants from recusare in Latin, to refuse. So those fines were called the recusancy fines. He stopped the collectors to go and collect the fines, but he didn't actually cancel them. And eventually the people that were very Protestant, they were against it, and they were displeased with the king. So eventually the king reintroduced those fines, and he actually backdated them. So horrible fines came back, and that's probably the worst thing with those boys. It's that they had hope, and suddenly the hopes were crushed. That's probably, you know, it's like, it's really hard to put the genie back in the bottle, you know, so that's probably the last drop for them. And especially for Parcy, for example, for him, the king had lied. The king had played them. He was a traitor and he had to die, as simple as that. And that's how they came up with such a crazy plan. So it's actually Catesby that had the idea, and at the beginning there were only 5 of them in the plan. They met first in their house here in Lambeth, and then they had a meeting later on in a pub. But at the time, those Catholics would have been very much spied on, you know. Robert Catesby, he was, he had been involved in some rebellions before. He was part of the Essex rebellions, trying to eliminate Queen Elizabeth I. There wasn't really a Catholic rebellion. There was anyone that was pissed off with the Queen, but, you know, his name was on the people you'd have to watch, you know. Because at the time, of course, there was a lot of spying. They wouldn't have used the term spies. It would have been intelligencers. And the building straight ahead, that one, that's the MI5. So those are the spies of today, the domestic spies today. Today we've got MI5 on this side and we've got MI6 on the other side of the river. The MI6, it's the international spies. The one you might see from James Bond, and you know, if you've seen Skyfall, there's a building that explodes in the film. It's on the other side of the river. But it doesn't mean we didn't have spies before. Actually, the spy system we know today, it's been mainly created in 1909 by a chap called Manfred Koenig. That's at the time when we were starting to be a bit wary of the Germans, you know, before the First World War. Manfred was an interesting character. He had a wooden leg, but you wouldn't know because he was wearing trousers. And he would do interviews at the Royal Horse Guards Hotel down the river, down that side. I'm gonna try to cross, bear with me. Let's go. I'm not sure those red lights are working properly. So Manfield would be doing the interview, trying to recruit the new spies. And he'd, in the middle of the interview, what he would do is he'd catch a knife and he'd stab his own leg. If the interviewee did not react too much, that was going to be a good recruit. Now I was going to go, but I shouldn't. Anyway, so yeah, those are the spies we know today. We still have many today because we've got digital spies today as well. But I'm going to wait because it's a bit noisy. Hi Tarek, and welcome everyone that just joined. So yeah, we already had a lot of spies in Elizabethan times. Some of you might know William Shakespeare might have been a spy, Christopher Marlowe might have been a spy. They would often use actors because actors would go across the country performing their plays, you know. And Elizabeth, she had her spy master, a chap called William Cecil. Oh, there are a lot of emergencies tonight. I hate to say, but it's probably people playing with fireworks. They are extremely dangerous. In this country, you are allowed to play with, you're allowed to buy fireworks. I did meet a guy that lost a few fingers. He was trying to save his little brother with fireworks. Anyway, I find them very scary and very dangerous, fireworks in general. Anyway, back to Cecil. William Cecil, he was of course the intelligencer of Queen Elizabeth I, and he had saved her from no less than 7 attempts on her life. So you know, he was very good at what he did, and he's also the one that framed Mary Queen of Scots. And his son, Robert Cecil, the first Earl of Salisbury, he was the one that was now taking care of James. Apologies if I call him Cecil or if I call him Salisbury, it's the same guy, okay? It's the Earl of Salisbury. Because I did watch the first time I did this tour, sometimes I'd say Cecil, sometimes I'll say Salisbury, so you might be a bit confused. It's the same guy. It's Robert Cecil, the Earl of Salisbury. So Cecil was a workaholic. He was obsessed by his job. He had almost no life. He suffered from scoliosis, so he was a bit tiny. Actually, Queen Elizabeth I used to call him my little health, and James I, it is said, called him my little pygmy. If, like me, you don't know what a pygmy is, let me show you a pygmy. That's a pygmy. So not a very nice nickname, but he was really dedicated to the safety of the king, and he was a very sharp guy. He had a network of spies across the country and across Europe. So he was it's like if he was running MI5 and MI6 together. And you know, at the time we did have a bit of a Cold War, or even an open war in the Netherlands between the Catholics and the Protestants in general. Now, let me cross over again. Let me show you the street sign, because it's an interesting name. You might see Thorney Street. Thorney was a little island. It's really hard to imagine today, but the area of Westminster Abbey, the Palace of Westminster, Parliament Square today, back in the day, it was an island. Because we had, we've got those lost rivers in London. Well, that was the site where the River Tyburn finished in a delta. So the little island, or the little eight, I should say, because technically it was an island on the river, was the island of Thorney. Let me show you a picture so you can imagine. So that you can see the two arms of the River Tyburn on the River Thames. So at the time, Parliament was on an island. That meant that if you wanted to dig some tunnels, they probably wouldn't be very dry. So it's not a very good idea. Now, there we go. Now, Catesby, Robert Catesby, or Robin, sometimes people call it Robin Catesby, he was a character. He had this little charm, or this little charisma, or this little, whatever you call it. He was the type of guy that could sell ice to an Eskimo. He was extremely attractive, like a good leader. People would follow him. And he came up with this horrible plan of blowing up the king. But not only the king. He wanted to blow up the opening of Parliament. So we're talking about the full gentry and all, all the court and the kids as well. James's two boys might have been there, and he wanted to blow off everything. If it had worked, it would have been crazy. But fireworks, yes, I agree. Anyway, eventually Catesby and his 5 friends met up in a pub. Not this little pub. This is the Marquis of Granby. You might see a lot of pubs in London and across the country called the Marquis of Granby, because Granby was he was a war military commander. I think he was fighting at the beginning of the 19th century. He was fighting the French for 7 years, actually. And after the war, there was a lot of veterans that had lost a limb or that had been partially disabled. He helped them opening pubs. And very often, when they opened their first pub, they named it after him. So that's why you see a lot of pubs now called, still today, the Marquis of Granby. Anyway, so not this pub. They met in another pub, the Duck and Drake. It doesn't exist anymore. It's on the Strand. And together, they blessed their own plan. They had a poor priest, that he didn't know what he was blessing, but they had a priest that was there as well to give a little sermon after their terrible plan. The beautiful building ahead of us, it used to be a church. It's now a concert hall. It is St. John of Smith Square. And it is a place that, I'm glad it's here on the way, because, today those conspirators, we would definitely call them terrorists. The term is anachronical, but, they created an act of terror. I'm going to try not to say the term again, because YouTube sometimes doesn't like this term. But anyway, today that's definitely what we will call them. And there are some terrorists, I have to say it again, there are some of those people that we loved in history. The suffragettes. There are some acts of terrors that are done for a good cause. The suffragettes, they used bombs. They actually tried to blow up that church. They used arson. They were lucky not to kill anyone apart from themselves. But technically, with the definition of the term today, they would have been, this one, ironically, this is where Emmeline Pankhurst had her funerals. So despite having tried to blow it off, eventually that's where the funeral happened. And then the body was taken down to Brompton Cemetery. You might remember we've seen her grave together. But all of that to say, you know, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, you know? And Catesby believed that so sharp of a disease required, a horrible disease required a so sharp a remedy. I think that's what he said. So yeah, he managed to convince all his mates to go with the plan. They secured a little lodging right next to Parliament. At the time, you know, Westminster was very easily accessible. It's not like today with all those securities and everything. At the time, it was almost like a normal building. You had people going with their daily life, you know, right next to the place where the opening of Parliament would have happened. And Parsi was quite close to the Earl Northumberland, so milking his relationship with Northumberland, he managed to secure some lodgings right next to the Parliament building. Originally, apparently, well, according to the confessions of one of them at least, originally the plan was to dig a tunnel and then to transport the gunpowder in the tunnel. But sadly, when they started to dig, the tunnel was full of water. As we mentioned earlier, it's right between the three arms of a river, so no surprise there. And then that's when magically one night they were in the lodgings when they heard some noises outside. So Guy Fawkes went to investigate. It was someone moving house. The lodgings right under the building they wanted to blow off were now available. So they secured the lease. And in a lot of the version of the story, you see it's a basement. They say it's a cellar, a basement. It really wasn't. It was an undercroft. So technically it was on ground level. It was the former kitchens of the palace. So that magically became available. Even better. So they secured the lease. And then they could simply store the gunpowder under the building. Easy. And gunpowder at the time, you know, you might wonder, how did they manage to carry 36 barrels? Well, first, the gentleman carrying them was Fawkes, Guy Fawkes, or Guido Fawkes, as he liked to be called. Guy had spent 10 years fighting in the Netherlands. So he wasn't really known in London. You know, it's hard to imagine today, but at the time the population of London was like just over 1,000 or something. And those people, they were from high society. They would have been known. And especially that some of them had been involved in some rebellions before. So they would have been watched. No one would watch Guido. They didn't know who he was. Well, Salisbury might have, but who knows. So Guy was coming from Rotherhithe, where he bought the gunpowder. Gunpowder was really easily accessible at the time because they were producing a lot of it. Because we had been at war with Spain for many years. But the war had just ended a year earlier, so suddenly there was an excess of gunpowder, so you could buy it for fairly cheap and carry it in barrels. But at the time you'd store anything in barrels. It could be rum, sugar, it could be anything, maybe even tobacco, whatever. So that wouldn't look particularly suspicious. And the River Thames was full of boats. Who was going to notice the little boat for Guy, you know? So that wasn't particularly suspicious to anyone. And that's how, at the time, there were only the 5 of them. But eventually, because of a plague in the summer, you know, you always had a bit of plague in London, especially in the summer, because of course you've got more rats. They reproduce more when it's warm. And they decided to postpone Parliament for like 8 months. So the conspirators suddenly had much more time. So that's when the plan ripened. At the time, they were banking on chaos. At the time, all they wanted was to blow off the king and all Parliament and all the documents as well, you know, everything was there. And then they didn't have much of a plan, but then they had many, many months to plan the end. So what they were hoping is to kill the king as well as his heir. That was Prince Henry. I know because the next king was, of course, Charles I, the one that was famously beheaded. We tend to forget, but he was not the first heir. Charles had an older brother, Henry. Henry was very much more popular than even his dad. People were looking forward to King Henry. He died quite young. Some say quite suspiciously. Some say he was a bit too popular, but that's a story for another day. So Henry would have been blown off. Hi, Sarah. With potentially little Charles, it wasn't quite clear whether the little Charles would have gone. But there was a sister between Charles and Henry. Her name was Elizabeth. She was about 9 years old, and she was in the Midlands somewhere, so she wouldn't have been at Parliament anyway. So the plan was then, after blowing off the king on these male heirs, to go and kidnap the little Elizabeth, that was 9 years old, and to basically have her as a puppet Catholic queen. They would marry her to a foreign Catholic priest and put her on the throne. So she would have been Queen Elizabeth II if the plan had worked, of course. That would have been interesting to see how everything would have developed if the plan had worked. Princess Elizabeth, she's actually the ancestor of our Queen Elizabeth. We said the royal family, they're from Germany. Elizabeth, she became Queen of Bohemia. She married the King of Bohemia, and she gave birth to the line of the Hanoverians. They were all cousins anyway, but technically the monarchy we have today, they are descendants of Elizabeth. Anyway, so they wanted to kidnap Elizabeth, marry her to a foreign prince. Officially, we don't know which one. Personally, I find it hard to believe that they didn't have a prince in mind.
19%.
And so officially, we don't know which one. If they did have one in mind, maybe there were some foreign powers that were aware of the plot. And actually, that could have been the leak. You know what? If they did approach a foreign Catholic prince, and if they refused, then they might have been the foreign prince might have been the one that told Salisbury. We will never know. It's hard to know how much Salisbury already knew of the plot. But, he was a spy master, and his dad was a plotter anyway. He was a very sharp guy. He probably knew much more than we think. Anyway, so that was the plan. And at that point, they had time to recruit more people, because they wanted more money, they wanted more horses. The horses at the time, they were like the getaway helicopters today. So they introduced more conspirators, and that probably was their downfall. They asked a guy called Francis Treason. He was very rich, so he had a lot of horses. But Treason was very, very reluctant to the plan straight away. He didn't want to go for it. He was begging him to stop, but that's too late. He was already in now. And Treason had a lot of friends, a lot of Catholic friends in high places. Some of them would have been at Parliament. For the conspirators, it didn't matter. They'll die and they'll go straight to heaven anyway. But for Treason, maybe it wasn't good. There was a chance that he might try to tell his friends to find an excuse not to go to Parliament. Some say that's exactly what happened, because 10 days after the opening of Parliament, Lord Monteagle was not a nice man. Monteagle was he was what they called a church popist. He was one of those Catholics at heart that would agree to go to church and agree to play the Protestant card. But people knew he was a Catholic. Some people believe he was already working as a spy for Salisbury. He probably was spying on his Catholic mates to see any kind of rebellion or plotting or anything. And that night, Lord Monteagle received a letter. It's a random guy that approached his servant on the street, giving him a letter for Monteagle. Monteagle opened the letter. That was in a village outside of London called Hoxton. It's funny because today Hoxton is very much part of London. It's in Hackney. Oh, thank you very much, Janie. That's very much appreciated. Thank you. So yeah, Monteagle got the letter. It was a bit cryptic, but it said, my lord, you should find an excuse to swift your attendance away from Parliament. They might suffer a terrible blow, yet they might not know what hurts them, the enemies of your religion. So a bit cryptic, but Monteagle believed it was very important. He jumped on his horse to go down to Whitehall to see Cecil. So he rode down to Whitehall, gave the letter to Cecil, and apparently Robert Cecil also found it a bit cryptic, and he was like, a terrible blow. And then he did nothing about it. And one of the servants of Monteagle heard about the letter, and he was actually a friend of our gang of conspirators. So he told them there's a letter, you screwed, don't do it, there's a letter that Monteagle is told the authorities, and and the conspirators, they should have stopped then. They should have cut their losses, they should have stopped everything. Did they? No. They inquired, they didn't hear anything. Parsi used his connection with Northumberland to go for dinner with him, to kind of investigate if they'd heard anything at Parliament, and no. Guido confirmed that no one had gone down to the cellar, so they decided to go ahead with the plan. When eventually, a few days before the opening of Parliament, Cecil wanted to let the king shine. He did not want to be the one that so I'm just going to try not to film anyone. He didn't want to be the one that finds the conspiracy himself. He wanted to let the king shine, so he decided to pretend he's not put two and two together, and he decided to show the letter to the king. The king looked at it and he was like, a terrible blow. Might that suggest powder? The king, his dad was killed with gunpowder in Scotland. Well, he was blown away, but then he was finished by strangulation, I think. But anyway, they had used powder for that before, and the king was like, okay, you go and search anywhere around Parliament, otherwise I'm gonna go tomorrow and I'll be blown off. So they went to search. They actually looked down the undercroft and they spotted a guy. Literally a guy. I've just said a guy. We are talking about Guy Fawkes. The expression when we say a guy today, like a chap, that's actually thanks to Guy Fawkes. Because, of course, after the event, we started to produce little guys, they looked more like scarecrows, and we burned them. And they were called a guy, and then everyone looking a bit scruffy, a bit dirty, a bit working class was a guy. So that's how still today we, when you're like, hey guys, you're actually mentioning Guy Fawkes to an extent. Anyway, so they spotted a guy, Guy Fawkes, under Parliament. They asked his name. He said John Johnson. If you were using an alias, it's probably the worst one to use. And that's it. Then they went to tell the king, there's a guy there and there's a lot of firewood. And the king was like, firewood? Did you check behind it? It might be hiding powder. Little pause in the story, but I know some of you like your letterbox, your post boxes as I do. This one is E2R, so it's not very rare. That's Queen Elizabeth II, but it is golden. That is the prototype. That's what they did after the Olympics 2012 for the whichever little town or village or city had an athlete with a winner, a gold medal winner, they painted in gold one of the letterboxes in their honor. So that's quite cute. Anyway, another little detail I want to show you here, if indeed it is not too dirty. Yeah, here we go. Some of you might know Ben Wilson, the Shringham Man. Is painted over here. Apologies, it's a bit dark. I took my torch with me, but it's at the bottom of my bag. So you might see it is Westminster Abbey. So he's painted Westminster Abbey right next to the Abbey. So that's quite cool. So this is Westminster Abbey. By the way, if it had worked, if it had exploded, for many years we were saying no, it wouldn't have worked because the powder was a bit damp anyway, it was a bit wet. Well, they have fairly recently in a military base somewhere in England, we don't know where, they actually recreated the event. So they had 36 barrels of slightly wet gunpowder, and they had rebuilt. Thank you. They had rebuilt the Parliament, or what it would have been like at the time, a building roughly the same size, and they exploded it. It would have been huge. They calculated that the windows of the Abbey would have been shattered. So for me standing here, I could have died. I could have been a collateral damage because the windows of the Abbey, the broken glass could have stabbed me. This side of the Abbey it wasn't there. This is the most modern side, but anyway. So yeah, it would have been huge. I mean, the amount of people that would have died would have been far, far more than we'll take the next slide. Far more than the 100 that might be inside of Parliament. Anyway, let's get back to our story. So the conspirators at that point, they're like, it's all good. No one is talking about the Montague letter. We good. Nobody knows. And they came to the building. They spotted a guy, and the king is like, go back. You go back. There might be gunpowder behind it. They go back right after midnight. So we're talking early morning on the 5th of November. The guy is still there, and they were a bit surprised by his attire because he had his furs on. He was like if he was ready to run, you know, when at this time he should be in his pajamas, really. And they looked behind the firewood, and they found the 36 barrels of gunpowder. Now Percy was still in town, so Percy jumped on his horse to tell the rest of the conspirators. Gatsby on the others, they had already started to ride towards the Midland. That's where they would have, in the Midlands, they would have captured a young princess. And Percy jumped on his horse. He overtook Gatsby, and he told him that Guido was now captured, that he was at the tower, that the plan had gone pear-shaped. Now, what they should have done is to run to maybe Catholic Ireland or something. But that's not what happens in the mind of a fanatic. They decided to go ahead with the plan. Gatsby decided to go and knock at the doors of the famous Catholic families in the Midlands, pretend that the king was dead, and try to create a huge Catholic uprising. That didn't work. People treated them like the plague. No one wanted anything to do with them. They ran away. Eventually Gatsby and his co-conspirators decided to go and lock themselves in Holbeach House. It's in Staffordshire. It's a home that belonged to one of them. And they knew eventually the sheriff and the authorities would come for them. So they had a bit of powder with them for their own muskets. But it was dumb because when they were riding towards the Midlands, it was very, very rainy. So Guido was not there anymore. Guido was at the tower. Guido was the expert in terms of powder. What they did next was very stupid. they decided to dry the powder by the fire. It exploded. None of them died. Sadly, it probably would have been a better death, but now one of them lost their eyesight, a lot of them were injured, but none of them died. Now they probably realized that God was not smiling on them, because at the time, there was no such thing as luck. When they secured the lodgings, they believed God was smiling on their plans. When they got the even better lodging in underneath the parliament, they were like, yes, God was with them. God had to be. And now God was no longer with them. So they probably realized that then they'd been wrong all along. And very quickly, the sheriff and 200 of his men surrounded the building. The authorities were so quick. It's quite impressive the way how communication was quick. See those little wooden graves? That's for the 11th of November. That's a little memorial they do in November. Anyway, back to our story. So yes, the sheriff and his men are surrounding the building, and eventually Catesby was like, we mean here to die, and they came out with their little swords. When the sheriff and his men, they had muskets. Surprisingly, Catesby and Parsi were killed with the same ball, with the same musket ball. Parsi was killed. Catesby did not die straight away. He had time to crawl inside and grab a little representation of the Virgin Mary to try to die like a martyr. And 2 others were killed, and the last few were captured and taken down to the tower. Guido, he had been at the tower all along, and he had not spoken straight away. First, he kind of stuck to his alias of John Johnson for a while. He actually had a little meeting with the king. That was quite unusual. Usually, the monarchs would run away from the plotters, but they had a little meeting, and the king was like, "Really? You would kill me and the royal children?" And Guido said, "Yeah, I wanted to blow you back off to your Scottish mountains." So Guido was really confident, and eventually the king decided to put him on the rack. The rack, it's probably the worst instrument of torture you might have heard of. It is at the Tower of London. We had only one in the country, because torture, I shouldn't say this term either on YouTube. It was actually illegal in England, as opposed to many countries on the continent, like Germany and stuff. You wouldn't use it to get random confessions over here. It was only authorized when the guilt was already proven. With Guy Fawkes, he had been caught red-handed. There was absolutely no doubts about his culpability. So he was put on the rack. And there are very, very few people in history that did not crack on the rack. It would break you. It would leave you disabled forever after that. And Guido talked. He did talk, but that was 2 days later. So he had given them 2 days, although Salisbury probably already knew all the names anyway, because the lodgings were rented under Parsi's name anyway. So he knew that a few Catholics had run away from London very quickly. Guy Fawkes tried to save some time for them to go on with the plan, but that didn't help anyway, because they were killed and captured anyway. Exactly, what a beautiful night. So this is, of course, the Parliament building with the tower you might call London Eye. London Eye is in the background, that you might call Big Ben. We shouldn't really call it Big Ben. It is the Elizabeth Tower. Big Ben is the name of the bell inside. So this would have not been here at the time of Guy Fawkes, but the Westminster Hall just there, that part of the building was. That's where they held the trial anyway, in the Westminster Hall just there. Most of them were trialed. Well, Tresham didn't. Tresham, the one that might or might not be the leak, he died in the Tower. He died of urinary tract infection. But the other, the surviving 8 were trialed over here in the Great Hall, and of course they were found guilty. 4 of them were hanged and drawn and quartered by St. Paul's Cathedral, and it was horrible. When you were hanged, drawn and quartered, you were dragged behind horses on the floor. The reason why you were on the floor is because you were not meant to breathe the same air, so you wouldn't pollute the air with your traitorous breath. And then they would have been hanged, but not long enough for them to die. And then they would be taken down where their willies would be cut off. They'll chop off their manhood. That was to signify that they were not worthy of any descendants. It's a bit dark, but up there that's Charles I. The little Charles that probably wouldn't have been at Parliament anyway. He was a bit young. The one that was famously beheaded. Ironically, he's looking straight at Oliver Cromwell, the one responsible for his death. But anyway, back to our traitors. So 4 of them were killed by the Tower of London. They would have been dragged behind horses on the street, and it's quite. I mean, you'd have to imagine their families were there. With Sir Everard Digby, his son was there shouting, "Daddy, Daddy!" Some of them actually had descendants that became traitors as well. Ambrose Rookwood, I think his grandson was he was a Jacobite. He was trying to bring back the Catholic James II and his heirs to the throne. So yes, some of them did have some descendants that were indeed traitors as well. But yeah, they were the four next one were hanged, drawn and quartered here by the very building they wanted to blow off. So that's Ambrose Rookwood, as well as Thomas Wintour, and of course Guy Fawkes. Guy was lucky. Well, lucky. I don't know if you can say lucky, but as he was going up the scaffold, Guy was completely broken. Let me show you his signature when he signed his confession. That's the one before, and that's the one after all the mistreatment, because I don't want to say the T word, all the mistreatment he had at the Tower. So you see, he couldn't even spell his name. His hands were broken. And when he went up the scaffold, it's hard to tell whether he jumped or he fell, but he managed to climb a bit too high on the scaffold and then jump and break his neck. So he was spared. Well, he wasn't spared. He died, but he was spared all the dismembering and cutting his manhood and all that. He died straight away. And that wasn't the end, though. After that, they also executed one of the Jesuit priests. 2 of them, Father Tesimond and Father Gerard, managed to escape. Gerard, that's the one you might have heard, the one that famously escaped the Tower of London. You know, the one with the orange ink? That was years earlier. And so they escaped to the continent, but Father Garnet, they were not guilty. The priests were not in with the plan, but the thing is, one of the conspirators had actually confessed to Father Tesimond. And, you know, under Catholic law, I don't know if I can say law, but under Catholic principles, whatever he said under confession, it's under confession. They would have gone against their own religion if they had intervened. So then Tesimond actually confessed to one of the others. So some of the priests were aware that something was up, but they were not in the plan, you know, and Father Garnet was also executed. This is George V over here. Nothing to do with our story tonight, but we talked about him. Remember when we talked, when we did the Royal Dark Tales? I told you that George V, so Queen Elizabeth II's granddad, he was actually murdered by his doctor, Lord Dawson of Penn. So that's the one. If you don't remember this story, you need to rewatch my Royal Dark Tales. I'll probably be rescheduling it soon anyway. Right, we should be back. I've come back to where we were, so hopefully we should be back. If we are back, let me know in the chat what was the last thing you've heard. I think we might be back. According to the system, we are back, but let me know in the chat whether you can hear me. And if you do, let me know the last thing you've heard. Okay, we're back. Perfect. Do you guys remember what was the last detail you've heard? I can go back a couple of minutes in the story. What was the last thing you've heard or the last thing you've seen? Yeah, so it might just be the security of the building. Anyway, I think I might have been talking about the Jesuit priest being executed. Okay, perfect, Tish. Thank you very much. Cool. So you've not missed anything about the story. So the straight away, the very first day almost, that's when bonfires started to be erected across the city. James I wanted the event to be celebrated. James I wanted us to remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. Remember. That was because they wanted a stick with which to beat Catholics for years to come. And if you go back to November 1605, the streets would have been very dark. It's November, it's the autumn, it's cold, there's no street lighting. So those bonfires, they were like explosions of joy, you know. And of course, very early they started to burn effigies as well. At the time, we didn't burn Guy Fawkes, we burned the Pope. And you know, popish people were represented as devilish and stuff. The Guy, I think it's only in the 19th century that they started to burn the Guy Fawkes. For many years, they burned the Pope. And you know, that story really helped the king in a way, because the king, that was the time when people were starting to wonder about his personality, you know, and his penchant for men. So that was a good thing for the king eventually. And now, did they really discover the plot a few hours before? Probably not. It is fairly obvious that Cecil would have known for a while, and he let the plot ripen, just for more of a dramatic effect. Oh, someone's coming out of Parliament. A politician on a motorcycle. Or moped. It's not even a motorcycle, it's an electric moped. Anyway, it might not be a politician, it could be a cleaner. Anyway, so yeah, did Cecil know? Probably. How much did he know? That's hard to tell. Did he know something was up, or did he already have all the names? Some even believe that Cecil was the brain behind it. That Cecil literally used those fanatics as puppets, but he was the one that actually... and you know, when you look at the lodgings that they got very easily, the lodging under the building that got magically available at the perfect time, it is possible that Cecil was actually behind it. And the Montague letter, we still don't know today who wrote it. The conspirators at the beginning, they seemed to believe it was Treason. But Treason wouldn't need to write a letter to his brother-in-law. He could just go and tell him, hey, don't go to Parliament, just go hunting or something. There was no need to write a letter that he knew would have been used as evidence at some point. Oh, it could have been a pizza delivery, Ronnie. Yeah. Although the driver looked a bit old, I don't usually delivery men are like. I don't want to be profiling. Maybe some of them might be a bit older, but anyway, did Cecil know? Yes, it's fairly obvious. How much did he know? We don't know. Did he magically make the building's undercraft available for them? Yes, it does look this way. Did he write the Montague letter? Because, well, there are many different options about the Montague letter. Could it be Tresham? I doubt it, but could it be Tresham and Monteagle together? Maybe Tresham, because Tresham was against the plot anyway. From day one, Tresham wanted to avoid it, but so could he have found an excuse to, with the anonymous letter, then Montague would have told Cecil, and then surely the conspirators would have stopped. They didn't. Oh, that's quite dramatic up there with the little gap for the moon right behind the clouds. It's beautiful. So yeah, did Tresham and Montague do it together? Maybe. Montague, he was the big winner in this story, because obviously from saving the king and everyone, he got a big pension, £500 a year. Not sure how much that is, but I think that's millions in today's money. So Montague was the big winner. Or was it Cecil that wrote the letter to Montague, knowing that Montague would come and give it straight to him? Maybe. Or was it one of the wives? Because, this story is full of testosterone. But those traitors, they had wives, they had sisters, they had mothers. Those ladies were not stupid. They would have known that something was up. There was a book that was written recently by a historian about, it's a fiction. So I've not read it because it's a fiction, so I don't want to be mixing the real story and the fiction in my head, but it is about Catesby's mother and Anne Vaux and all those ladies that were, Anne Vaux was the cousin. She was the one harboring Father Garnet. She was accused of having an affair with him as well. Anne Vaux, she lived another 30 years after that. Those ladies, they were often the one harboring the priest, because it was much harder to find a lady, because ladies had no money. The money belonged to their husbands anyway, so it was harder to give them a fine. Anyway, could it have been the book, by the way, I think it's called Winter Gardens by Nicola something, if you are interested. It's a fiction, but very well researched. It's about Catesby's mum and how she would have perceived everything. Anyway, it could have been one of the ladies. Who knows? I don't know. I don't even really have an opinion. I think it's more likely to be Tresham and Montague together, or Montague alone. If Montague had heard or overheard, and he did not want to be assimilated with the conspirators, and he was already working as a spy for Salisbury, did he write it to himself? That is very, very possible as well. We'll probably never know. What we do know is that since that day, we still have those fireworks. Although it's not that big anymore, bonfire night, unless you live in Lewes, in Sussex. I've never been because I'm always here doing this tour. One day I'd love to go to Lewes. They still have those huge effigies and parade, and apparently it's quite something to go to Lewes for bonfire night. But generally it's not as big of a party as it was once. I guess it's because of Halloween that took over. Halloween came over from America, and now it's too much partying in a week. But back in the day, yeah, I don't know really. I didn't grow up in this country, but I have a feeling it was a bit bigger back in the day. And you know what? There was a boy that disappeared on bonfire night. A tragic story, a big mystery. We still don't know what happened. In 1979, yeah. A young boy from Islington. I think he was 15 years old. he was originally from Islington, but his dad had taken a job as a chauffeur from the Australian High Commission, and I'm gonna cross over because I think there's a spot on that side, but I don't have a good signal. So eventually they moved to a place right next to Hyde Park, so not far from Earl's Court. So basically, his dad, as a chauffeur, had a job on site next to the Australian important people, and that night, on bonfire night, after school, he was still in his school uniform. He jumped on the underground. His parents believed that he was going to go and see his brother. He was going to go and see the firework with his brother. So his brother was still in Islington. And he didn't come back that night. But the parents didn't worry. They believed he was at his brother's. So they actually only got worried the next evening. So the services, the emergency services, were delayed by 24 hours. And Martin Allen was his name, the young boy. They never found him. There were a lot of eyewitnesses because he was in a school uniform, but he had a yellow Astro shoulder bag that was very yellow, so people had noticed him in the underground. Hi, Trish. And yeah, we never know what happened to him. In Earl's Court, there were a lot of eyewitnesses that saw the boy with a tall blonde guy in his 30s wearing a denim jacket, and the boy looked uncomfortable, and no one actually did anything, but there were, I think, 11 witnesses. It's crazy now that no one did anything, but it is psychology, you know. Apparently, when if you were alone on a dark street and you'll see a man with a young boy that looks uncomfortable, you'd act. But if it's on a busy underground, when no one does anything, then no one does anything. You know, you don't trust your own perception anymore because no one else reacts. Anyway, so they never found the man. They had an artist impression of him, you know, tall guy with a denim jacket and blonde guy. So he was almost definitely the perpetrator, but the body was never found. The boy was never found. They even interviewed, the famous serial killer, Dennis Nelson, that was often targeting young men in Soho and King's Cross, but Dennis had nothing to say about it. They found a guy in Liverpool. There was a guy that was indeed a sex offencer. They found in his flat in Liverpool literally a shrine. There was a full little bedroom with a lot of paper clippings of articles about Martin's disappearance for years, many years of articles, but they couldn't find anything to link him to the case either. So sadly, they never found little Martin. Apparently, one of the police officers had told the family, "Give up. People in high places are involved. You should give up." But they didn't find any proofs of anyone in high places. I should move from here because of the music. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. I've just realized I've not shown you the most famous Gatsby we've had. Robert Gatsby. He's been recently portrayed by Kit Harington in the BBC version of the Gunpowder Plot. It's quite a good show. It's fairly realistic. If you've not watched it, you should. And Kit Harington is probably the best actor to play Gatsby because he's got this little charm as well, you know. And actually, you know what? He's a descendant of Robert Gatsby. Well, he's also a descendant of one of the many bastards of Charles II. So if you look far enough, you can be a descendant of anybody. But yeah, he's a descendant of Gatsby. My chat is... Let me try to... There you go. Cool. You've watched it, Janie? Did you like it? Cool. Thank you for coming tonight, guys. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions before I let you go. Thanks, Pauline. Thanks everyone for your support. If you drop me a little tip, you can do it on YouTube, you can do it on PayPal, you can do it on Buy Me a Coffee, whichever is more comfortable for you. But it really, really helps. It's thanks to your generosity that I can keep doing those tours and do more research for new ones and all that. That's another nice angle on the building of Parliament. And if you want to see a bit more of me, in 2 days I'm taking you to Budapest. I'm going to the dentist in Budapest on Friday. And after that I'll do a little live walk where I'll tell you about some of the local murders they've had. And if any of you was completely new to me, if you've made it that far into the video, you might want to consider subscribing. And even if you think you are already subscribed, double check. Because you know what, every time I have a tour that's quite a popular one like this one, I lose a few subscribers. I think it might be some of you trying to hit the bell and clicking unsubscribe as you're trying to hit the bell. I hope so, unless I've just lost a few followers today for another reason I don't know. But yeah, even if you think you are subscribed, make sure you double check, because sometimes you can I cannot say it, unsubscribe by accident. Thank you, Fran. Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. Let me know if you have any questions. If not, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to go unpack because I'm going tomorrow. Well, I'm going straight after work, so I'll have to go to work with my weekend bag. Oh, can you hear Big Ben? Don't know if you can hear it with my microphone. So it must be, what time is it then? Oh, it's 1 minute early. It's meant to be the most precise clock in the country. Yes, Budapest. Cool. Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. Have a great evening, a great morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And hopefully I'll see you in Budapest. If not, I'm taking you to Dublin soon. I've got 2 tours scheduled already, and I'll probably do a 3rd one with Hazel somewhere. So look out for that. So that'll be in 2 weeks' time, I think. Maybe 3 weeks. Right. Thank you, guys. Have a good one. See you soon.